myself anyways. I thought I might as well record it and bring you along. I'm working on a model that I'm going to 3D print. This model is part of a costume. It's the Black Widow Age of Ultron utility belt cases. So I've already modeled 2 of them, and they printed out and they're lovely. And one of them is meant to be a wallet, and one is a battery pack for some electroluminescent wiring. And this one is going to be a case to hold an iPhone. So it's a little bit bigger, I think, than the original, but it's still in keeping with the size of the others. So I am working from drawings that I made from lots of Google image searches. And I'm working in a program here called OpenSCAD because I'm a programmer and not so much of a 3D modeler. And what this program lets me do is use an idea called constructive solid geometry to build this shape that I'm working with, that I'm rotating here, out of 3D primitives. In this case, the smaller cube, or the smaller box that you're seeing here inside of this frame. The smaller box is this first set of code, and the frame around the outside here is the second box. So the smaller one, or the inside of the primary content of the box is a little bit smaller in the X direction, and in the Z direction, but a little bigger in the Y direction. And you can see from our legend here that X is running sort of northwest to southeast, while Z is running straight up and down for the moment, and Y is running kind of southwest to northeast. And that of course will change as I rotate the screen around to get a look at what I'm doing. But you can always see the axis legend just here. And then in addition to making the cubes, I'm doing something called a Minkowski operation, which takes this sphere that I've set to be 1.5 units. I'm working with them as millimeters, but it's not terribly important. 1.5 units, and it just sort of smears the sphere all over the surface of this cube that I wrote. So imagine it's taking this cube that's 80 by 35 by 160, and it's adding the radius of the sphere to every point. So there's an additional 0.75, so it's really like 80. Well, it's 81.5 in total, but half of it would be 40.75, and 35 divided by 2 would be 15, 16, 17 and a half. And so it'd be 17 and a half plus, or 17.5 plus 0.75, so 18 point something. It's actually too late for me to be doing this. 18.25, I guess. And so on and so forth. And really that doesn't make a huge difference, except at the corners where I'm going to zoom in on the preview pane here, up here on this corner. Remind myself how to do this. Right click, pans, right? So if you look just here, there's sort of a dent to the corner, and it appears that it's making a very, not a very nice rounded corner, but it sort of puts a bevel on. And that's actually because spheres in OpenSCAD, until you crank up the number of facets or faces, spheres are represented by these sort of pentagonal sided are five-faceted polygons, or polyhedra. And so they've got these little tetrahedral sides, and then there's, oh, good grief, there's these little quadrilaterals for the sides, and it kind of looks, well, weird, but it makes for these nice flat sides. But then later on, when I go to render it for the final model making, I'll crank the number of facets up to about 100, and this will look like a nice smooth rounded edge, all for the price of just having to remember that when I'm trying to cut these things in half, if I'm trying to cut these things in half in a direction that matters, that my bottom coordinate, for example, is 0.75 mils, or 0.75 millimeters further down than I think it would be based on these cubes. That's a lot of boring detail. What I was planning on showing today was that this object is going to have a band added around its waist, about a third up from the bottom, so just about here. I'm going to wrap a band around here that corresponds to the band that goes all the way around the top in the XZ direction. So I'm going to add one in the XY plane as well, or parallel to the XY plane as well, and then we're going to notch it on the front so that it has a nice sort of like three-banded effect. And then I'm going to make several cuts into the surface here, constructing cutting tools out of other solids, and then removing, sculpting away sections of this front face to make a nice design. And it's just a series of parallel lines and parallel rectangles, but ultimately it looks pretty nifty. So I will show you how I go about doing that. And once we get that all done, I'll probably have spent all of the time that you care to watch this, but I also need to cut the top off to make this into a box. And I may get as far as cutting that top so that we can hollow it out. But there's a neat feature at the top. Instead of being just a straight line, it has sort of a keyhole effect to it. But yeah, we'll get there. So I'm working from a sketch that I have in front of me, and as time goes by, you'll get to see what I'm seeing in my sketchbook appear here on screen. And from this point forward, I don't have any real need to move the preview around, so we're just going to work over here in the code screen and talk about some happy little lines and happy little cubes. And so here we go. So one of the first things I'm going to do is create a module around this box that I've already made. And what that will allow me to do is represent everything that's currently on screen as a function that I can call later on. So this is going to be module, let's call it case for now. Maybe case primitive. And then I'll be able to use this module in a moment as a kind of like a function call. Speaking of which, it has an empty parameter list. So if I were doing a parameterized object where the sizes are different based on, or like where some of the dimensions change based on a single dimension that I pass in, I could make this list actually have more elements to it that I could use. So I could say like X, Y, and Z, and then I could use those X, Y, and Z here, and modification to them here. So if I were to pass in 80, 35, 160, like I've got is the first cube, I could have this, so 80 is X, 35 is Y, 160 is Z. Then for the second cube, I could have this be x plus 5, y minus 20, z plus 5. And, then I would have a parameterized object so that if I decided to make the box bigger, I wouldn't have to recompute all of these. I would just call this with a new set of parameters. But for now, I don't have any need to do that. So, not for this object. Sometimes down the road, I'll come back and do a refactor to smooth some of those elements away. And, but yeah, that's for another time. So now that I've made this change, I'm going to regenerate, and oh no, the preview window has gone blank. That's because now I have only defined a module, and I haven't actually called it. If I come down here and run case primitive again, my object comes back again. And this is important because the next thing that I want to do is build a series of cutting tools that I'm going to subtract from my primitive. And in order to make this easier on myself, I think what I will do is I'm going to take the primitive that I've got right now, and I'm going to how do I want to handle this? I would like I want to move it to the origin, and I want to move one of the corners to the origin of my coordinate system, because that's going to simplify placement of my cutting tools a little bit later on. So that's going to go like this. I'm going to use the translate function. And translate takes a list of values, an x, y, and a z. And since I know that my cube is currently centered, what I want to do is I want to move it. I want to move it up by 160 divided by 2 plus 0.75, so 80 plus 0.75, so 80.75. And I'm doing that, I'm centering this cube at the origin rather than this cube at the origin, because I don't actually have anything that I want to cut away from the band. So I'm just going to arrange to cut everything away from the actual face. And a thought has just occurred to me. Right, okay, so while I'm actually going to move it up so that I don't cut away any of the bottom of the box, I'm actually going to move it up far enough that I don't cut off any of the contribution of the sphere in this Minkowski. I am going to not include the Minkowski amount when I go to move it in the x and y directions, because what that'll let me do is just sort of ignore the translation in x and y. Well, it'll simplify my translations in x and y of the cutting tools that I'm going to be using, which will be nice because having to remember to add 0.75 to everything kind of gets on my nerves. And as you'll see in a minute, like, the depth is not super important, so it just kind of boils down to just some considerations about how deep I want the cuts to go. I know, that's about clear as mud, but it'll make sense in a second here. So I want to move my box in the y direction by, let's see, 15, 16, 17.5. And in the x direction by 40. And you're going to see the case jump. Well, you should have seen the case jump. I must have spelled something wrong. Translate has an S in it. Okay. And now I'm going to recenter my preview, but you can see that if I zoom in just here, that in my Z direction I've jumped up so that the bottom of the sphere's contribution, if I rotate it just right, is being preserved. You see how the X, well, I mean, it's kind of hard to see it because of the way things work here, but the X-axis doesn't cut. Am I doing things wrong? So it's not 0.75 after all, it is 1.5. Well, I've been misunderstanding the Minkowski, and that explains some things. So this apparently needs to be 1.5. So 81.5. Well, what do you know? I had another project in which I was trying to get the Minkowski cuts to work right and calculate them correctly. And what I thought was happening was that a sphere of radius of 1.5 was being dragged along the surface of my other object from its center, so that I was looking at like a hull around my original object that was equal to the radius of the sphere. Oh, and I'm an idiot. Okay, so you have probably all noticed during the course of my my discourse here that at lines 4 and 9 I have sphere with the parameter r equals 1.5, and I've been sitting here talking about dividing the radius or dividing 1.5 in half because I want the radius, not the diameter. Herb derp. But of course that is the radius. Yeah, color me embarrassed. Let's never speak of this. So I've moved my cube up so that I won't cut the bottom off, but I've arranged that the X and Y axes, you can kind of see right here, this is where the Y axis is running, and it is inside the radius of this ball, this curvature right here. And that's because I didn't move the box over an additional 1.5 in the X direction. So I'm going to be able to still cut it with the XZ axis. Or it's still being divided by the XZ plane. And likewise over here. There we go. You can see that am I in orthographic? Right, I'm in orthographic view, so this works. You can see that the axis here, the x-axis, is in line with the unrounded portion or the unbeveled portion of this face. And what that's going to do is give me a 1.5 millimeter relief when I start cutting things that are aligned on the x-axis, as we will begin to do in just a moment here. So, just recentering my preview. Okay, that looks nice. I sort of like a downward view on things. Okay. So now that I've got the cube where I want it, we might like to ask why I have the cube just there. And the reason is that I'm going to use a difference operation to subtract several things from the cube, from the case primitive. So now, what this does is say, oh no, you say, oh no, yes. There we go. Alright, I had my tab stop messed up there for a second. So, for example, I would like to cut some bars into the front face here at some number of millimeters up and some number of millimeters in. So at about 5 millimeters plus 5 millimeters on the x-axis, and let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 5. I'm working off of a 5mm graph paper. 17 times 5. Well, here's actually kind of a funny thing. You can do math. You might have guessed, right here in the. So I was talking about being able to say, for this cube, I could do x plus 5 and y minus 20 and whatever all. Well, you can just sort of do that. So I would like to cut myself a cube. And it's going to have dimensions, but I'm not going to set them just now. So I'm going to cut out a cube, but I want that cube to be translated. Let's see. Not at all in the x direction. I need to translate it about. Oh no, sorry, I did right. I wanted to move it 5mm in the x direction. And I'm going to need to translate it in the y direction, but exactly how much depends on how thick I end up making it in the y direction just here, and when I actually define its size. And so for now, I'm just going to say let's translate it. Let's see, 1.5. Let's translate it 3mm, and then we're going to assume that I'm going to make a cube, just for the sake of argument. It's 3 by 3 by 3. This will make more sense in a second. So my x is going to determine how well, I tell you what, we'll see it all here in just a second. So 5mm and translated by 3mm. And then in the z direction, I needed to do 17 times 5mm. Because I don't feel like doing the math right now. And as soon as I hit preview or save on this, it's going to pop up in the preview box. And then nothing's going to happen because I'm trying to do this live. So what I will do here, what I would like to know now is where my cube just went. And the way that I'm going to show that to myself is by making the case primitive temporarily transparent. Using the percent sign there, that's a debugging symbol. Alright, and so this all turns sort of transparent gray. The case primitive did, and there's my cube sitting inside of it somewhere. And oh right, I committed one of the common blunders, and I translated my cube in the positive y direction when I meant to translate it in the negative y direction. Yeah, that's gonna work better. So you can see that we just lost some of the grayness to it, and that's because it jumped forward, or it jumped backwards actually in the y direction, and now it pierces the surface. So when I turn the debug off, it's going to appear as a hole in the face, because we're doing a difference operation, remember? Alright, and so what I want this to do is to stretch across the face here, cutting its little swathe as it goes, cutting a channel as it goes, and I know that box is, that this front face is 80 units wide. So I'm going to, and I know that I've translated it in 5 because that's where I want it to start. So instead of having it go, so that tells me that I want a 70mm wide stretch. So instead of 3, I'm going to change that to 70. And now we have a cut that runs clear across the front face. And that is by a long shot taller in the z direction than I want it to be. In my sketches, it appears to be about a millimeter, maybe a millimeter and a half. So in the z direction, I'm going to cut this down to 1.5, and we'll see it get much thinner there, exactly half as thin. And yeah, so that's the first of these elements. And I would like to create some more of these. And I've got a couple of ways I can do it. I can write a for loop describe something that is like a Z offset plus 17.5 to reach the spot where I would like to be, and really that just looks like 4 Z off equals 0, and let me think, how do I handle this? For Z off equals, okay, I know what I want to do here. So for I equals 0, and I is less than, how many of these do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. I is less than 3. I is less than 4. Because I'm using less than, not less than, equal. I would like to I plus plus. I think this works here. I can't actually remember, so I'm going to hit F1. And it's going to fail me. Give me just a moment while I look this up. I need a cheat sheet. And you can't see me looking at it because it pops open in a new window, but I won't take too long here. Let's see, mathematical functions for far. Oh, right, okay. Start, end. So I'm remembering how to do this in C and C++, but it looks a little bit more like Python in OpenSCAD. So what I'm going to do is make a list where I go from I equals 0 to 4. And I think actually this is inclusive, so I'm going to go from I equals 0 to 3. And then I'm going to say that I want, since my offsets here appear to be I think about 3.5 millimeters. So I'm going to go for I times 3.5 plus 17 times 5. And that should have me creating 3 or 4 lines very similar to the one that I've got right here, picking exactly where this one is, and then moving up a couple of spaces. So let's see how well I did. Oh yeah! Okay, I'm extremely proud of myself. I did it in one shot and without camera tricks. Just with a lot of reading the manual. Okay, so that's my first bit of hatching on this, that makes me really happy. That's my first bit of detail on this box. Unfortunately, this box is almost all cutaways, so I have a few more of those to do, and they're actually just at pretty regular intervals. So I will need to copy this and something's gone funny about I'm not sure what's going on with my tab, with my tab return stops here, but whatever. Alright. So what I think I would like to do, I know that was the bottom one was a 17.5, because I put it exactly on that line, and there's some that go up, but I've got another set that begin at, there's not 17.5, but 17 times 5, I've got another set that begin at 17, 16, they begin at about 16 times 5 minus 1.5. It's actually kind of a pain in the butt, so I'm just going to say it, oh yeah, I'm going to say it 16.5. So we'll sort of keep that 16 times 5. And then we're going to drop them. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of those to make. So we'll set up another for loop. In fact, I'm just going to copy this wholesale this time. object altogether. So let's see. I'm going to be moving down this time. And so I'm going to cut that, cut my offset, and I'm going to subtract it away, or subtract from my Y value in order to move downward. Let's see, and I already knew that I wanted to go 16.5 minus 2 minus I times 3.5. And I think that will do. Right, so I left myself a wide band, and then I've got, I have everything being cut off just a little bit. Or I don't have anything being cut off yet, but I will have in just a moment. And then I'm going to need one more of these cutting tool objects. And I'm going to fix all of my tabination. Okay. And this one is going to be at, let's see, that's, if that was 16, 15, 14, 13. Actually, it should be right at 13, so this probably won't work out perfectly. I'll have to tweak it around, but in my drawing it looks like this should be sitting at precisely 13.5. And if I did this right, we should see that bottom cut increase in width just a little. Okay, so all I've actually done is added another one that's just slightly below it. So this will probably be at 13.5 plus 2. Maybe just 1, in fact. Okay, so now I've got those two bands sort of growing together. And in my Z direction, I need this band to be about 7 or 8 millimeters wide. So let's start it at 7 and see how that looks. Oh, right, let's grow up. Okay, so this is going to 13.5. Well, we'll just go back to 13.5 even, and then we will subtract about 5 off of it. And that gets us down a little bit lower, so I'll try 4.5. And those match up pretty nicely now, and I've got a nice buffer zone sitting below. So I'm quite happy with that. The next thing that I need to do is what's supposed to be happening is deal with what's supposed to be happening in this second set of objects that I've just made. All of these components are going to be cut diagonally by a triangle slash plus cube that I'm going to push over onto the right side of the box. So from roughly here to here, I'm going to cut away using a triangle and another rectangle that's built just here, or another cube. And so to make the triangle, what I'm going to do is define 2D shape and extrude it. And I guess as long as I'm doing that, I might as well just add the rectangle onto it, because I'm going to be building myself a polygon. So, I know that I'm going to be using a linear extrude, which looks like this. And I don't exactly know what my details on that are going to be, so I'm just going to leave it for a second. And then I'm going to create some 2D polygons. And the way I do that is by specifying let's say the word polygon, and then I specify a series of points. Polygon. And since I'm not going to do a very complicated face, I'm not going to specify multiple faces inside of this list. I'm just going to say here are all of my points. And the counterclockwise circuit, or the in-order circuit of these points, is going to be my positions. Or my face. And so I can specify this in 2 dimensions. So my polygon is going to look like the point. Let's see. I'm going to start at the origin, so we'll have 0, 0. And then we will have. This looks like it's going to go about. Let's see if I can count off the right book here. It's going to begin at 0, 0, and I'm going to make a counterclockwise circuit, and so that's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. position, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 30 plus about 2.5. So 32.5 millimeters tall. 5. And then I'm going to bring myself back over about, looks like 7.5 millimeters, so 33 minus 7.5, 33, so 30 minus 4.5, so 26, and 25.5, and still 32.5, and then we just make our way back, and then we need to make our way back to 0, but I don't go all the way back to 0, 0 yet. I'm going to go to 0, 7.5. The polygon's going to automatically wrap back around to 0, 0 to finish itself off. So, this is going to build in an XY plane, so lying flat relative to our object here. And so we'll eventually need to rotate it. First I'm going to finish off this linear extrude. So I need to tell it how high to make this object. And I think I need to tell it. There's actually quite a few. Okay, good. The cheat sheet sometimes forgets to tell me whether I'm looking at positional or named parameters. So I need a height of 3. And then I have to try to remember it for myself, and it's always a pain. And I need to rotate this into the, I need to rotate up into the XZ plane. So I'm going to rotate it by 0 degrees in, or else I'm going to rotate around the x-axis by 90 degrees, and 0 degrees around the y, and 0 degrees around z. And then I'm going to, just so that we can see it, I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to use another trick, so that we can see where everything lands here. I'm going to use a star to temporarily make line 30 be the root of our object, which is going to replace everything that we're seeing inside the difference right now with just this thing that I just specified. And it's going to fail on me, probably because I forgot a semicolon. Alright, well, that is not working at all like I thought it would. So I'm going to go with another technique here where I translate this way down the y-axis, so it's way out in front of the main object relative to my current viewpoint. So I'm going to move 0 in the x. I'm going to move like negative 20-ish in the y, and I'm not going to move in z. And that should have put my object right out in front here so that I can take a look at it, but it didn't. So what am I forgetting here? Alright, I'm forgetting that I'm doing a difference at this point. I'm actually still inside the difference, and that's no good for trying to work out one of these objects in the first place. So if I do it this way, I can actually see my object here. Oftentimes I'll turn these cutting tools into modules, so that I can turn them on and off individually before I start trying to make them interface with the trying to make them cut away from the surface that I'm working on. But in this case, I was filled with hubris and it bit me. Okay, so what I'd like to do here is instead of bringing it out 20, I'd like to bring it out just about 3, so that it is just in front of the box that I'm going to cut it away from. And you can see at this point that moving it back 3, unlike when we moved this first cutting tool out or back by 3, has in fact moved it entirely away from the surface. And the reason for that is that it was rotated around the x-axis, and that doing that flipped it up so that it was already south of the x-axis, or in the negative y portion of the x-axis. So I don't really need to move it at all in order to get it to be just exactly flush with the surface. But to get it to cut into the surface, I actually need to move it forward in the y direction, in the positive y direction, by just a little bit. So now we can just see the edge. And what I'm going to do now is move it up, and then I'll move it over. So in the z direction, I know that this needs to go up by about 60, I think. And that brings it up until it's just about smooth, just about even with the bottom of this cut. And then I need to move it in the x direction about, let's see, that back edge is at 70, and I made it 32.5 wide, so I need to move it about 32.5 to get it to line up just right. I think. This is probably wrong. I'm going to land right in the middle, aren't I? Yeah. Let's try. Let's see. I already had it sitting at 0. So 5, and 5, and it's probably just about 35. It's still not going to be far enough. Let's try 40. I really like that I can just sort of mess around with it, because I'm probably going to have to mess around with it a bunch anyways to make it land exactly where I want. It's kind of a funny thing. I must have gotten the measurement wrong somehow, somewhere along the line, because this is showing up as much bigger on screen than it did when I did it on paper a few minutes ago, or a few days ago. Okay, what do I have happened now? I'm actually kind of happy with the shape of it. Alright. I just want to get I would like to make the top of it be a little less high up there. Oh, I see what happened. Okay. I actually meant to make each of these cubes a bit wider than these cubes on top, so there'd be a contrast. So while the top one was at 1.5, I meant for these to be at 3.5, which means they need to move by something closer to 5 millimeters each. nice, this nice cut here that I actually still have to finish up so that it lines up perfectly with this edge, and so that it's not set deeper into the surface than all the other cuts. But that's the idea for the pattern. So let's see, 1.5 is too much. Let's try 1. Maybe even 0. Something seems to be. Alright, so 0 seems to have us nice and flush there. This is what I was saying about cutting out, letting myself use 0. So now I don't actually have to do anything here, but I'm just cutting away that 1.5 millimeter radius circle.